Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be looking at some really interesting changes happening around the world. And before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. All right, you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay, great. So today we're going to be unpacking some pretty big shifts. And to help us do that, we're going to be drawing on insights from economist Richard Wolff. Now, you know how we always hear about the U.S. dollar being so powerful and dominant in the global economy?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that things might be changing.
Yeah, that's right. You know what's interesting is that even some of the biggest supporters of capitalism are starting to recognize that the dollar's power on the world stage is shrinking.
Really?
Yeah, and according to Wolff, the US dollar's share of global reserves has actually dropped from 73% to 59% in just the last 2 decades.
Wow, 73% down to 59%. I mean, that's a pretty big difference.
It is. It is.
So what's causing this change? Like, why are countries moving away from the dollar?
Well, Wolff argues that a key reason is that other countries are looking to reduce their reliance on the U.S. For decades, the dollar has been the world's primary reserve currency, meaning that central banks around the world hold large amounts of U.S. dollars. This has given the United States a lot of financial leverage. But as other economies grow, they want to establish their own financial power and reduce their dependence on the U.S.
Okay, that makes sense. But hasn't the U.S. benefited a lot from having the dollar be the world's top currency?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. The U.S. has basically been able to buy goods and services from all over the world by simply printing more dollars. It's like trading pieces of paper for real valuable stuff.
Yeah, it does sound like a pretty sweet deal.
Yeah, it has been.
Yeah.
And it's not just imports. The dominance of the dollar has also made it easier for the U.S. government to borrow money to fund its activities. Things like military spending and infrastructure projects. They can borrow in their own currency without having to worry about exchange rates or the risk of their currency losing value. But as the dollar's power shrinks, these advantages start to fade.
So if the dollar isn't the king of the castle anymore, who are the contenders looking to take its place?
Well, Wolff highlights a few key players. One is the group of nations known as BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They're working together to create a trading system that doesn't rely on the U.S. dollar. This would allow them to trade with each other and with other countries using their own currencies, reducing the need for dollars.
Okay, and I've also heard about something called the Petro-Yuan. What is that exactly?
So the Petro-Yuan refers to the potential for oil, which is one of the world's most important commodities, right, to be traded in Chinese yuan instead of U.S. dollars. China, being a major energy consumer, has been discussing this possibility with large oil producers like Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Now, imagine a world where oil, the lifeblood of the global economy, is no longer priced in dollars.
Yeah, that would be a huge shift. So what would something like that mean for the average American?
Well, one of the most direct impacts would be the rising cost of imported goods. A weaker dollar means that everything from electronics to clothing to food that's brought in from other countries becomes more expensive. This leads to inflation, which we've all been feeling recently.
So that new phone or that trip abroad that you've been saving up for is going to cost you even more.
Exactly. On the other hand, a weaker dollar could potentially make American-made products cheaper for buyers in other countries, which could boost certain industries here in the U.S.
So some American businesses might actually benefit from a weaker dollar.
That's possible. But it's important to remember that these kinds of transitions are rarely smooth. If the dollar's decline isn't managed carefully, it could lead to economic instability and even a crisis. And Wolff doesn't stop there. He paints a picture of a world dividing into 2 major blocks.
Oh, tell me more about that. What are these 2 blocks?
So on one side, you have the U.S. and its traditional allies in Europe. And on the other side, you have China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and the BRICS nations we talked about earlier. It's like watching the world rearrange itself.
Yeah, half the world's population potentially aligning with China. That's a massive shift. What is this for Europe? They've historically been close to the U.S., right?
That's right. European countries initially supported the U.S. in its opposition to Russia's actions, mainly due to long-standing habits, historical alliances, and a belief that Russia would quickly weaken.
So what happened?
Well, it seems they might have miscalculated. Russia has shown a lot more resilience than many anticipated, partly due to its strong ties with China. In fact, we're seeing increasing economic cooperation between Russia and Asian countries, which is making the sanctions imposed by the U.S. and Europe less effective.
So Europe is kind of stuck between their old alliance with the U.S. and this new powerful bloc that's emerging. That sounds like a tough spot to be in.
It certainly is a difficult situation for them.
Yeah.
Raises a crucial question. Which side will Europe ultimately choose? The answer could have major implications for the future.
Wow, so much is happening on the global stage right now. It's kind of mind-blowing. And China seems to be right in the middle of it all.
Absolutely. China has been making some very strategic moves that are reshaping the global landscape, particularly in the energy sector.
Like what?
For instance, they recently played a key role in brokering a peace agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
That's pretty significant, isn't it?
It really is. It's almost like China, a major energy consumer, is stepping in to become the protector of major energy suppliers.
And if they're trading oil in yuan instead of dollars, that could really change the balance of power, couldn't it?
That's exactly the question. Could China become the new power broker in the global energy market? And what does that mean for the U.S., which has held that position for so long? It's a fascinating development to watch. It really makes you think, is this the beginning of the end for American dominance?
That's a big question. I mean, does Wolff think that the U.S. is actually on its way out as a global superpower?
Well, he argues that this power shift is already happening. He believes that the key for the U.S. is to accept this new reality, a world where it's no longer the only superpower calling the shots, which is a big adjustment for a country that's been used to being at the top for so long.
Right. So what does Wolff think all of this means for the average American? Is it just about, things getting more expensive?
Well, he goes beyond just inflation and says these global shifts could actually lead to a fundamental restructuring of the American economy. Right now, the U.S. is heavily reliant on imports, but Wolff suggests that a weaker dollar could actually push the U.S. to become more export-focused.
So instead of buying so much stuff from other countries, we'd be making more things here in America to sell to the rest of the world.
Exactly. Imagine a scenario where American-made goods are suddenly much more competitive on the global market because they're cheaper due to the weaker dollar. It could lead to a revival of manufacturing and a shift in job markets.
That would be a huge change.
Yeah.
But is it a good thing or a bad thing?
It's hard to say for sure. While some industries might thrive in this new environment, others might struggle to adapt. The transition could be bumpy with some winners and some losers.
It sounds like we're in for a pretty wild ride.
Right.
It's hard to predict exactly how it's all going to shake out.
That's what makes it so fascinating. It really highlights the importance of staying informed and understanding the forces at play. And speaking of forces at play, we can't ignore the elephant in the room. China Wolff really emphasizes the strategic moves they've been making, especially when it comes to energy.
Yeah, China's been pretty busy on the world stage, haven't they?
They certainly have. Their influence in the global energy market is growing rapidly, and their role in brokering the peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia shows just how much geopolitical clout they have.
Yeah, it's interesting how a country that used to be heavily dependent on energy imports is now positioning itself as a major player in global energy markets.
It is quite a shift. And with the potential for oil to be traded in yuan instead of dollars, it really throws into question the future of U.S. dominance in the energy sector.
So let's recap what we've talked about so far. We've got the decline of the dollar, the rise of alternative currencies like the yuan, the potential impact on the U.S. economy, the emergence of these two big global blocs, and China's growing influence in the energy market. So what's the main takeaway here? What should our listeners be thinking about?
I think Wolff's analysis is a call to view the world through a new lens. We're moving away from a world where the U.S. was the dominant force to a more multipolar world with multiple centers of power.
A more complex and unpredictable world.
Exactly. And it's full of both challenges and opportunities. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for navigating the years ahead.
Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, Europe's dilemma. It sounds like they're in a really tough spot.
They are indeed. Remember how European countries initially sided with the U.S. in opposing Russia? Well, Wolff points out that this was based on several factors: long-standing habits, historical alliances, and the belief that Russia would quickly crumble. There was also the possibility of economic benefits, especially for their military industries.
But it seems like that bet didn't really pay off.
Not quite. Russia has proved much tougher than many expected, and now Europe is stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're under pressure from the U.S. to maintain a united front against Russia, but at the same time, they see the potential advantages of aligning with this new bloc led by China.
It's like they're having to choose between their old friend and a new, potentially more powerful friend.
That's a good way to put it. It's a difficult decision with significant consequences, and it's unclear which path they will ultimately choose.
It's a reminder that the global landscape is always shifting, and we have to be adaptable and informed to navigate these changes.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating time to be alive, full of uncertainty and possibility.
It's amazing to think about how interconnected everything is in the world. What happens on the other side of the globe can really have a direct impact on our lives here.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It's easy to get caught up in all the geopolitical maneuvering and, the economic jargon, but at the end of the day, these global shifts have real consequences for people's everyday lives.
Yeah, Wolff seems to be emphasizing that a lot.
He does. He argues that the decline of the dollar and the rise of other powers could have a profound impact on jobs, prices, opportunities, basically everything that makes up the fabric of our lives. lives.
Yeah.
It's not just about abstract economic theories. It's about how we live, how we work, and how we interact with the world.
And it's not just about the economic impact either, right? I mean, there are social and political dimensions to all of this to consider as well.
Absolutely. As the balance of power shifts, we can expect to see changes in cultural influence, political alliances, even the way we see ourselves in relation to other countries. It's a whole interconnected web of changes.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the future and what kind of world we're moving towards. It sounds like Wolff is encouraging us to kind of face these changes head on.
He is. He's challenging us to think critically about the world as it is right now, not as we wish it would be or how it used to be. He wants us to engage with these shifts and understand how they will shape the future, whether we like it or not.
So what does this all mean for our listeners? Like, what can they do in the face of these massive global changes?
Well, I think the first step is simply recognizing that the world is in a state of flux. The old assumptions about power and influence are fading, and new possibilities, both exciting and daunting, are emerging. It's a time to stay informed, to be adaptable, and to be open to new ways of thinking about the world.
It sounds like we're entering a period of uncertainty, but also a period of great opportunity.
Exactly. We're all navigating these uncharted waters together. It's a time for, open and honest conversations about the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. And that's exactly what we aim to do here on the Deep Dive.
Absolutely. We want to help our listeners make sense of these complex changes and to empower them to participate in shaping the future. We've covered a lot of ground today, but it's just a starting point. We encourage you to continue exploring these ideas and to engage with the world around you.
Yeah, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep the conversation going.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the shifting world order. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.
And we hope you'll join us again next time for another deep dive into the big ideas shaping our world.